Well, the man who brought me this almost 25 years ago died yesterday. You probably heard on the news. I had another speech prepared for today, but that news struck me with such a profound feeling of loss that I had to address it, and I thought this was a perfect venue in which to share it. And sometimes, this is actually a little bit of a tabletop, a little bit of a Toastmaster lesson, is sometimes you can be thrown into a situation at a funeral where you're asked to give something and you have to stand up and give it. So I thought about it and I wrote a speech last night. This is my first mouse. This is the beginning of this was my Apple Plus. Mac Plus, and that was my mouse from it, and I was able to dig it out of, believe it or not, in a box. Steve Jobs, more than any other single person on the planet, I felt, has had a very profound effect on my life. How so? I never met the man, but I've been a commercial graphic designer for 50 years this year. I started in 1961 as an apprentice in a commercial art and photo studio in Montreal. Now this studio did all the work for all the major advertising agencies, J. Walter Thompson, Young and Rubicam, all those names you hear. We were the go-to shop to do all the commercial art and photography. So in those days when you did an ad, you had to do a paste-up of it. And the paste-up comprised of typesetting and usually an image of some sort, an illustration or a photography. Now, typesetting in those days, the best typesetting you could buy was set one character at a time. Little pieces of lead and put in a row. And they did row after row after row. And when they finished a whole block of it, they would tie it all up and they would ink it and they would press a very clean proof, and that proof would then be hustled over by these messenger boys who worked for the typesetting company on bicycles, and they'd scurry. This was pre-courier days. This is a long time ago. And those, why am I telling you about type? Well, because Steve Jobs, even though he is famous to most of you for the iPod or the iPad or the iPhone, but in fact, how Steve Jobs affected my life was that Steve Jobs had a very profound effect on the typesetting world. Because typesetting was a very powerful part of our lives that was controlled by unions and big business. It was a multi-billion-dollar business. And literally, within a 10-year window, which I witnessed, Steve Jobs and a man named John Warnock. John Warnock is the guy who actually is the founder of Adobe. You've all heard of Adobe. And Adobe was founded by this man, John Warnock, who wrote the language PostScript. The PostScript language is what all your PostScript printers work with. Without PostScript, no printing. But why it was profound for me was that for years we'd do these paste-ups of the type, and then we would put a position image in for just to hold the position. And the magic of putting those things together to make the plate went off somewhere else. It was out of our control. But Steve Jobs brought typography to the world. The Apple computer that I had and the PostScript laser printer that I had brought typesetting and the imagery together on the same plane digitally. They became digital code of which I had control over. Now, as a graphic designer and as somebody who spent his life massaging words and pictures, this was a breakthrough. And I was an early adopter, obviously. In 1987, when that came out, I said, yes, that's it. I can see it coming. And I bought a laser printer. Now, I bought a laser printer recently, a color laser printer for 150 bucks. You know, 4-color PostScript laser printer. But my first laser printer cost me almost $8,000. I know. But it was mine. It was in my studio. Steve Jobs single-handedly, with John Warnock, literally brought the typesetting industry, put it into non-existent. It brought it to us, and the industry folded away and evolved into something else. So when Steve Jobs passed away yesterday, I felt a sense of loss. But I also felt that also a sense of gratitude, because Steve Jobs brought all of us something that we use every day. The access to information, just the evolution of the whole computer industry, not to mention all the wonderful gadgets like the iPhone, which I carry around and I consider my finest photographic piece of equipment I've ever owned, because I have it with me all the time. All my fancy cameras and all that sort of stuff, I don't have, and that's because of Steve Jobs. So I hope that Steve Jobs will inspire young people to not seek second best, but to set their standards high and to be as innovative as he was. Steve Jobs brought us many, many things that will be unfolded over the next few days as we all get to let this information of him passing sink in. But Steve Jobs changed the quality of my life forever, and I thank him for that.